Welcome back to day 10. Our goal for today, given an unfactorable quadratic equation, you will be able to solve for the roots by using the quadratic equation. All right, so far in this unit, our ways for solving quadratics. Number one, we always want to try to factor first. So GCF DOPS trinomial grouping. If that doesn't work, then we try completing the square. If we can't use completing the square, the final method we're going to use is what we're going to learn today, which is quadratic equation. All right, so for the quadratic equation, you're going to need a writing utensil, and you're definitely going to be needing your calculator today. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Well, what is the quadratic equation, or in other words, the quadratic formula? Well, here it is. The quadratic formula. When you cannot factor ax squared plus bx plus c equals c, then you can use this formula right here. Now, in order to use it, you must have the equation equal to 0. And this is the formula, and this you're going to have to memorize. But believe me, we're going to use it so many times, it's going to come naturally. But you do have to memorize this formula. And the formula is x equals, remember your x, this is your roots or your zeros, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so you might be wondering, well, where does the a, the b, and the c come from? And that comes from the formula or the equation itself. So the a is the number in front of the x squared, the b is the number in front of the x, and the c is the constant, the number that's all by itself. All right, so let's go ahead and try our first example. So number one, here we have solve using the quadratic equation, leave solution in simplest radical form. All right, so let's go ahead. The first thing we have to do is make sure this is set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the 6x over. So now we have x squared minus 6x plus 7 is equal to 0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off to the side and I'm going to write down what my a, my b, and my c values are. So my a is the number in front of the x squared. If there's no number there, there's a 1 there. So my a is 1. My b is the number in front of the x, which is negative 6. And my c is the constant, which is going to be 7. Now that I have my values, I'm going to rewrite my quadratic formula. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so let's go ahead and let's plug it in. So x equals, now the b is a negative, and then we have a negative 6. So I have a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Remember, when we substitute in, we're going to put it in parentheses, b squared minus 4, our a value is 1, our c value is 7, all over 2 times a, and our a is equal to 1. All right, so now we just plugged everything in. Now comes simplifying everything. So here we're going to get x equals, now a negative, this turns into a positive, plus or minus. Now this is where I'm going to use my calculator to figure this out. So in the calculator, I'm not going to put in the square root symbol, but I'm going to type in everything that's underneath the square root. So parentheses, negative 6 parentheses squared, minus 4 parentheses 1 parentheses 7, and then we hit enter, and we get 8. So I put an 8 here. Okay, now here's a little trick. This number here under the radical has to be positive. You can't take the negative or a square root of a negative number. That's called in a non-real number. So this number here always has to be positive. So if you're not positive, we have to go back and fix it. All over 2 times 1 is 2. All right, so now we have used our quadratic equation. However, it does say simplest radical form. So what we have to do now is we have to see if we can simplify this at all. So let's think. So here's my little think bubble. Okay, we have a radical 8, and radical 8 can be broken into radical 4 times radical 2. And the square root of 4 is just 2 radical 2. So I can replace this radical 8 with 2 radical 2. So this is x is equal to 6 plus or minus 2 radical 2 all over 2. Okay, now, if I look carefully, do both 6 and 2, are they both divisible by 2? Yes, they are. So that means we can actually divide. And if you want to divide, if you want to simplify the fraction, it has to go into both of these. So does 2 go into 6? Yes, it does. It goes in 3 times. Does 2 go into 2? Yes, it does 1 time. So we can cancel out that 2. And then we're going to end up with x is equal to 3 plus or minus radical 2. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you complete the square. All right, let's go over and let's try another one. So let's take a look here at number 2. So remember, we're solving by completing the square. So the first thing we have to do is set it equal to 0. So we're going to subtract the 4x. So now we're going to get x squared minus 4x plus 2 is equal to 0. So now I'm going to go over to the side and I'm going to write down my a, b, and my c values. My a is the number in front of the x squared, which is 1. My b is the number in front of the x, which here it's going to be negative 4. My c is the value that's by itself, the constant, which is a 2. Now I'm going to write down the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, and now all we have to do is substitute in our values. So here we have a negative, and my b value is negative 4, plus or minus the square root. Now remember, whenever you substitute values in, you have to put them in parentheses. Minus 4 times my a is 1, my c is 2, all over 2 times 1. So now we're going to go ahead and simplify. So a negative 4 becomes a positive 4, plus or minus. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the calculator. We're only going to type in what's underneath the radical. Do not type in the radical here. So we go negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. We hit enter. Do we have a positive number? Yes, we do. So if we take a look here, it's going to be an 8. Okay, and then this whole thing is over 2. Okay, now we do want simplest radical form, so we have done the quadratic formula, so we are done with that, but now we have to simplify. Now radical 8, we already did that over here, so I'm just going to go ahead and change that. So 4 plus or minus 2 radical 2. Now, oops, this whole thing is over 2. All right, can I divide both of those by 2, the whole numbers? Yes, I can. 2 goes into 4 twice. 2 goes into 2 once, and that cancels out the 2. So my final answer here is going to be x is equal to 2 plus or minus radical 2. And you've done it. Now, we're not always going to be able to reduce the fraction, but for both of these, it worked. All right, let's go ahead. We're going to flip it over, and we're going to try one more. Okay, for this one, instead of leaving our answer as a radical, here we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So let's go ahead and give it a try. So we want to go ahead and set it equal to 0 first. So I'm going to subtract to the 7x. X squared minus 7x minus 3 equals 0. I want standard form, so make sure you have the x squared, the x, and then the constant. Then I'm going to write down my a, my b, and my c values. My a is 1, my b is negative 7, and my c is negative 3. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now all we have to do is plug in the value. So we're going to substitute them in. So a negative 7 plus or minus the square root, negative 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 3, all over 2 times 1. So x is equal to, so a negative 7 becomes a positive 7, plus or minus the square root. Now I'm going to let my calculator do the work. So we're only typing in what's underneath, including the parentheses. We want to make sure when we hit enter, we want to make sure it's a positive answer. We get a positive 61. And this whole thing is over 2. All right, and 61 is a prime number, so we can't simplify it. All right, so here's our solution, but now it says round to the nearest hundredth. So this is where we have to use our calculator to come up with the answer. All right, so I know that my two answers here, 7 plus radical 61 all over 2, and 7 minus radical 61 all over 2. Now, to put this in the calculator, you have to pay very careful attention. If you have a TI 84 or above, I'm going to show you a really cool trick that's going to do this for us. Okay, so to do this, and listen carefully and rewind if you get lost, we're going to hit the alpha button, the green button, and then you're going to hit Y equals. And when you do that, we're going to get a little menu, and we're going to type in number 1, and it's a fraction. And on your screen, we're going to get a fraction. So I'm going to clear it out. We're going to do that one more time. Hit the green button, alpha, the Y equals. We get our menu, and we want choice 1 for a fraction. And now I'm going to type in my fraction the way it is. So 7 plus radical 61 all over 2. Oops, and I put 64. I'm just going to go back and make that a 61, and then I hit enter. And now we have it. So it's going to be 7.405, and I want the nearest hundredth, so that's 2 decimals. I look behind it, it's a 5, so I'm going to round it up. So it's going to be 7.41. There's my first answer. Now for my second answer, again, I'm going to hit alpha, Y equals, and then choice 1. And now I'm going to go 7 minus radical 61 all over 2, and I hit enter. And this answer is going to be negative 0.41. We've got it. Now, if you do not have a TI 84, you have to be very careful how you plug this in. So we have to type in parentheses, because this entire thing here, this entire binomial, so this is a binomial, which is a quantity. Quantities go into parentheses. This is the whole entire numerator. So 7 plus radical 61, go over, and your parentheses, and then you're going to divide the whole thing by 2. And then you're going to get the same answer. If you do not use parentheses, what's going to happen is it's only going to divide the radical, and see, we're not going to get the correct answer there. So you have to be very careful with how you plug it in. All right, so we have got it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what you're going to do next is flip it over to the next page, and I'd like you to try questions 1 and 2 on your own. So leave the first one as a radical, and for the second one, you're going to round it by using your calculator. Have a great night, everyone.